I wasn't supposed to be at that meeting. The quarterly investors conference was strictly for executive leadership, and I was just an entry-level project manager at Horizon Dynamics. But when Diane from the executive office called in sick, they needed someone to take notes. Someone invisible, someone nobody would notice, someone like me. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I sat in the corner of the boardroom, laptop open, fingers poised over the keyboard, trying to blend into the mahogany paneling. The presentation was beginning. A potential acquisition of a promising startup that had been making waves in the Boston tech scene. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce James Wilson, CEO of Quantum Innovations. My fingers froze above the keys. James Wilson, my brother. The brother who had told our parents I was wasting my computer science degree. The brother who had laughed when I mentioned starting my own company someday. The brother who had looked me straight in the eye at our father's birthday party 3 years ago and said, "Emma, let's be honest. You'll never amount to anything in this industry." And now here he was, walking into the boardroom in his tailored suit, his confident smile faltering for just a moment when our eyes met. I watched as recognition dawned on his face, followed quickly by confusion, then dismissal. He straightened his tie and launched into his presentation, never acknowledging my presence. I typed every word, recorded every figure, noted every promise he made about his company's revolutionary software platform. All while a plan began forming in my mind. I grew up in my brother's shadow. James was the golden child of the Wilson family, straight-A student, programming prodigy, youngest intern ever hired at Microsoft's Boston office. Our parents' refrigerator was plastered with his achievements, leaving little room for my modest honors. It wasn't that I wasn't smart. I graduated with honors from MIT, just like James. I had the same genetic makeup, the same opportunities, the same passion for technology. But James had something I didn't: unshakable confidence and our father's unwavering approval. "You should be more like your brother," became the soundtrack of my childhood. James doesn't second-guess himself. James takes risks. James knows how to command a room. What they meant was, James is a man in a man's industry, and I was just Emma, too thoughtful, too collaborative, too willing to consider other perspectives before making decisions. All qualities that would later make me a superior leader, but at the time, were seen as weaknesses. After graduation, James shot up the corporate ladder while I bounced between mid-level positions at various tech companies. Not because I couldn't excel, my performance reviews were always stellar, but because I kept hitting glass ceilings that somehow didn't exist for my brother. The defining moment came at Dad's 60th birthday party. I had just been passed over for a promotion at Adaptive Systems, and James cornered me by the drinks table. "Another setback, huh?" He swirled the bourbon in his glass, ice clinking against crystal. "You know your problem, Emma? You don't have killer instinct." "Not everyone defines success by how many people they step on to get ahead," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. He laughed, that condescending chuckle that made my skin crawl. "This industry isn't built for people like you. You're too soft, too afraid to make the hard calls." He leaned closer, bourbon on his breath. "Let's be honest, you'll never amount to anything in this industry." Something broke inside me that night. Not my spirit, my complacency. The comfortable lie I'd been telling myself that if I just worked hard enough, my talent would be recognized. I realized that playing by the established rules meant playing a game designed for me to lose. The next morning, I called Paul Martinez, a former colleague who had started his own consulting firm. Paul had tried to recruit me multiple times, impressed by my technical skills and what he called my emotional intelligence, the very quality my family dismissed. "I'm in," I told him, "but I want a partnership track, not just a job." Paul didn't hesitate. "Done. I've been telling you for years you're wasted in corporate structures. When can you start?" Within 6 months, I had helped Paul secure 3 major clients that had previously seemed out of reach. My approach, focusing on client needs rather than flashy tech, building relationships rather than making demands, turned out to be exactly what these established companies were looking for in a consulting partner. By the end of the first year, Paul made good on his promise. Martinez and Wilson Consulting was born, with me holding a 40% stake. We specialized in helping traditional industries adapt to tech transformations, less glamorous than cutting-edge startups, but far more lucrative. While James was making headlines with Quantum Innovations' splashy product launches and equally splashy failures, we were quietly building a reputation as the firm that actually delivered results. Our client list grew steadily, our projects came in on time and under budget, and our staff rarely turned over. I barely saw James during those years. At family gatherings, he would still hold court, bragging about his latest venture capital round or acquisition talks, while politely ignoring my professional existence. Our parents still beamed at his stories, asking few questions about my growing business. It didn't matter. I had stopped seeking their approval. I had found my path, my voice, and my strength. I had built something substantial while James was still building castles in the air. And then came that day at Horizon Dynamics, the day I wasn't supposed to be in that boardroom, listening to my brother pitch his company to the very corporation that had recently become our biggest client. I recognized the software platform James was presenting. It was remarkably similar to a concept I had shared with him years ago over Christmas dinner, an idea he had dismissed as too conservative and lacking vision. Now here he was, pitching my vision as his innovation. But that wasn't what made my heart race. It was what James wasn't saying that concerned me. I knew from our work with Horizon that they were looking to acquire a stable, scalable solution to integrate with their existing infrastructure. James was promising them a revolutionary disruption, exactly what they didn't need. More importantly, I knew something James didn't. Horizon wasn't interested in acquiring Quantum Innovations for its technology. They wanted to acqui-hire James and his team, then gradually phase out the actual product. As I sat typing his grandiose promises, a plan began to take shape. I wouldn't expose James. I wouldn't embarrass him. Instead, I would save him from himself, on my terms. After the meeting, I slipped out before James could approach me. I had notes to review, research to conduct, and a strategy to formulate. Because for the first time in our lives, I held information that James desperately needed. I called Lisa Chen, my closest friend and our firm's legal counsel, that evening. I need to know exactly how much leverage we have with Horizon, I said, pacing my apartment overlooking the Charles River. And I need to know what options we have for a potential acquisition of our own. Lisa was silent for a moment. Emma, are you talking about acquiring your brother's company? Is this personal? I stopped pacing, watching the lights reflect on the dark water below. This is business, Lisa, just business. But we both knew it wasn't entirely true. This was personal. It had always been personal between James and me. The difference was, for once, I had the upper hand. I spent the next week analyzing Quantum Innovations' public financial disclosures, speaking confidentially with former employees, and reviewing the technical documentation I could access. The picture that emerged wasn't pretty. James had burned. Through 3 rounds of venture capital funding, his company had pivoted 4 times in 5 years. The current software platform, the one he was pitching to Horizon, was barely functional, held together with temporary fixes and workarounds. Quantum was months away from insolvency. Meanwhile, Martinez and Wilson was thriving. We had cash reserves, a stellar reputation, and most importantly, the trust of Horizon Dynamics' executive team. We were in the perfect position to make a move. I scheduled a private meeting with Horizon's CEO, Marcus Freeman. I understand you're considering acquiring Quantum Innovations, I said once pleasantries were exchanged. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus nodded. We're in the early stages of discussion. James Wilson has an impressive vision. Vision without execution is hallucination, I replied. I have reason to believe quantum's technology is not what it appears to be. Marcus leaned forward. Go on. I laid out what I had discovered, the technical shortcomings, the financial instability, the pattern of overpromising and under-delivering. I didn't mention that James was my brother. That was irrelevant to the business discussion. What are you suggesting, Emma? Marcus asked when I had finished. I'm suggesting that Martinez and Wilson acquire Quantum instead. We can stabilize the technology, retain the valuable team members, and then license the improved solution to Horizon at favorable terms. You get what you actually need without the risk. Marcus studied me for a long moment. That's an interesting proposition, but what's in it for you? I met his gaze steadily. A complementary technology asset, an expanded talent pool, and a strengthened strategic partnership with Horizon. It's a sound business decision. He nodded slowly. I'll need to discuss this with the board, but off the record, I think you may have just saved us from a costly mistake. As I left Marcus's office, my phone buzzed with a text from James. Saw you at Horizon. Dinner tonight? We should catch up. After years of dismissal and condescension, now he wanted to catch up. Probably hoping to leverage our familial connection to smooth his deal with Horizon. The irony wasn't lost on E. I texted back, busy tonight, lunch tomorrow at Serafina 1 p.m. His response came immediately. Perfect. See you then, sis. I smiled as I slipped my phone back into my pocket. James had no idea what was coming. By this time tomorrow, I would be offering to buy his failing company. The brother who said I'd never amount to anything would soon be reporting to me. The restaurant was James's kind of place, expensive, pretentious, full of people trying too hard to impress each other. He was already seated when I arrived, nursing a glass of scotch despite the early hour. Emma! He stood, arms wide for a hug that I returned with minimal enthusiasm. You look great. Success suits you. I sat across from him, declining the wine he tried to order for me. Sparkling water is fine. I have an important meeting this afternoon. He raised an eyebrow. Always the responsible one. Some things never change. He leaned back, surveying me with newfound interest. So, Martinez and Wilson Consulting. I hear you've been making waves. Dad mentioned you're working with Horizon. And there it was. The real reason for this sudden fraternal reunion. We are, I said simply. They're our biggest client. That must be exciting, he replied, voice carefully casual. They're a fantastic organization. Visionary leadership. I took a sip of water. They know what they want, and they're willing to invest in the right partnerships to get it. James nodded eagerly. Exactly. That's exactly their philosophy. In fact, that's why they're so interested in quantum. Our technologies align perfectly with their strategic direction. I studied my brother, his eager expression, the slight sheen of sweat on his forehead, the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes. He was desperate. The James Wilson I knew never showed desperation. How are things at Quantum, really? I asked. Quietly. His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Couldn't be better. We're on the verge of something huge. The acquisition by Horizon. You know about that? He looked surprised, then quickly recovered. Of course you do. Well, yes. It's practically a done deal. Just working out the details. I set down my water glass carefully. It's not a done deal, James. Horizon has concerns. Now I had his full attention. What concerns? What have you heard? They're worried about integration issues, stability problems. They've been burned before by acquisitions that looked good on paper. but fell apart in implementation. James waved dismissively. That's standard pre-acquisition jitters. Our technology is solid. Is it? I held his gaze. Because I've spoken with several former quantum engineers who say otherwise. The color drained from his face. You've been investigating my company? Why would you do that? Because that's my job, James. Martinez and Wilson specializes in technical due diligence and strategic integration. Horizon values our opinion. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. So what? You're trying to sabotage me? Is that it? Some kind of revenge? I'm trying to prevent Horizon from making a $40 million mistake, I replied evenly. And I'm trying to save you from a very public failure. James laughed bitterly. Save me? How exactly do you plan to do that? The moment had arrived. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Martinez and Wilson is prepared to acquire quantum innovations for $15 million. We'll retain your core engineering team, stabilize the technology, and incorporate the salvageable components into our existing solutions. He stared at the folder without opening it. You want to buy my company. I want to rescue your company, I corrected. The alternative is Horizon walking away and Quantum facing bankruptcy within months. You know I'm right. James finally opened the folder, scanning the terms sheet with increasing disbelief. This would make me report to you. Yes, you'd lead the innovation division of Martinez and Wilson, reporting directly to me as managing partner. He looked up, anger and humiliation battling in his expression. After everything, all these years, you expect me to work for my little sister? I leaned forward. I expect you to make a smart business decision instead of letting pride destroy everything you've built. Quantum has potential, James. It just needs stable leadership and realistic expectations. Is this about what I said at Dad's birthday? About you never amounting to anything? His voice had risen, drawing glances from nearby tables. Is this how you prove me wrong? By taking over my company when I'm vulnerable? I kept my voice low and steady. This isn't about proving you wrong, James. You already did that yourself. This is about business. The offer is fair, more than fair given Quantum's financial position. I need time to think, he muttered. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow. After that, I'll be forced to share my full due diligence report with Horizon's board. I stood, placing money on the table for my sparkling water. This isn't personal, James. It's just business. As I walked away, I heard him call after me. It's always been personal between us, Emma. Always. He wasn't wrong, but for the first time, personal satisfaction and sound business strategy were perfectly aligned. The next 24 hours were some of the longest of my life. I barely slept, anticipating James's call, preparing for both possible outcomes. Part of me expected him to fight, to find another investor, to do anything rather than accept my offer. But the rational part knew he had no choice. At 4:52 p.m. the following day, my phone rang. I accept the terms, James said without preamble. But I have one condition. I'm listening. We tell Mom and Dad together, and we present it as a merger, not an acquisition. My pride can't take them knowing the truth. It was such a small thing, meaningless in business terms, important only to our family dynamics. The old Emma might have insisted on the full public victory, but I was no longer that person. Agreed, I said. We'll call it a strategic partnership, if you prefer. He exhaled slowly. Thank you. 2 weeks later, the papers were signed. Quantum Innovations became the innovation division of Martinez and Wilson Consulting, with James as division director. His technical expertise, freed from the burdens of running a company, proved valuable. His team, relieved to have stable leadership and realistic deadlines, thrived. And Horizon Dynamics. They were so impressed by our handling of the situation that they increased their contract with us by 30%. At the first all-hands meeting after the acquisition, I introduced James to our staff. "Many of you know James Wilson by reputation," I said, standing confidently at the podium while he sat in the front row. "What you may not know is that we share more than a last name. James is my brother, and his vision for innovative solutions will complement our proven track record of practical implementation." I saw the surprise on our employees' faces, the calculating looks as they processed this new dynamic. "The Wilson siblings are quite the powerhouse," Paul Martinez added, clapping James on the shoulder. "Though I think we all know who's really in charge." The room laughed, and even James managed a smile, strained but genuine. Later, in my office, he lingered after our executive team meeting. "You know, I still can't quite believe it," he said, examining the awards and client testimonials displayed on my wall. "My little sister, the boss." "Does it bother you?" I asked frankly. He considered the question seriously. "Less than I thought it would. You're good at this, Emma. Better than I ever was." "We were just good at different things," I offered. "You can see possibilities no one else imagines. I can turn possibilities into realities." He nodded slowly. "Together, we might actually be unstoppable." "Is that an admission that you were wrong about me?" I couldn't resist asking. James laughed, not the condescending chuckle I had grown to hate, but something warmer, more genuine. "Consider this my formal retraction. Emma Wilson amounts to quite a lot in this industry. More than enough to save her brother from himself." I smiled, extending my hand. "Welcome to Martinez and Wilson, James. Your quarterly review is in 3 months. Don't disappoint me." He took my hand, shaking it firmly. "Wouldn't dream of it, boss." As he left my office, I turned to look out the window at the Boston skyline. The view from the top, I discovered, wasn't about looking down on others. It was about seeing further, clearer, and with greater perspective than I ever had before. My brother said I'd never amount to anything. Now his company reports to me. But the true measure of success isn't in the power reversal. It's in creating something strong enough, valuable enough, to transform even our deepest rivalries into productive partnerships. Sometimes, amounting to something means becoming big, enough to forgive, wise enough to collaborate, and secure enough to lead even those who once doubted you most. And that, I realized, is the kind of success no one can ever take away. The morning after I left that boardroom at Horizon Dynamics, I couldn't shake the image of James's face when he saw me sitting there. The flash of recognition, followed by that dismissive glance, as if I were merely part of the furniture. It was the same look he'd given me our entire lives, a look that said I wasn't worth acknowledging. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by my apartment window, watching the morning fog roll off the Charles River. Boston was just waking up, but I had barely slept. My mind had been racing all night, piecing together a strategy that had been years in the making without me even realizing it. My phone buzzed with a text from Paul. "How did the Horizon meeting go? Anything interesting?" If he only knew. I hesitated before responding. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal, and I needed to be careful about mixing the two. But Paul wasn't just my business partner. He was the first person who had truly believed in me when I couldn't even believe in myself. "Need to talk in person," I texted back. "Breakfast at Tot in an hour?" His response was immediate. "I'll be there. Sounds serious." Serious didn't begin to cover it. What I was contemplating could change everything, for our firm, for quantum innovations, and for the complex relationship between James and me that had shaped so much of my life. Tat Bakery was crowded as usual, but we managed to snag a small table by the window. Paul arrived right on time, his expression concerned as he sat down across from me. "What happened at Horizon?" he asked, skipping the pleasantries. I took a deep breath. The CEO they're considering acquiring, Quantum Innovations? It's run by my brother James. Paul's eyebrows shot up. James Wilson is your brother? How did I not know this? I've kept my professional and family lives separate for obvious reasons. I stirred my coffee absently. James has no idea that Martinez and Wilson works closely with Horizon. When he saw me in that boardroom, he looked right through me. Paul leaned back, processing this information. This complicates things. It does and it doesn't, I replied. I sat through his entire presentation. Paul, Quantum's platform is smoke and mirrors. Half the features James promised don't exist yet, and their financial situation is precarious at best. You sound very sure about that. I pulled out my tablet and opened a folder I'd created last night. 3 years ago, James approached me for technical advice on a project. He didn't give me details, but I recognized it as early quantum architecture. I told him there were foundational flaws that would cause scaling issues down the line. Let me guess, he ignored you? Worse, he told me I was being unnecessarily cautious and that I'd never understand disruptive innovation. I smiled, grimly. But I did something he didn't expect. I documented everything and kept track of Quantum's development through public information and my network. Paul's eyes widened as I showed him my files, meticulous records of Quantum's technical challenges, staff turnover, and funding rounds. Emma, this is thorough. I didn't do it to sabotage him, I explained, feeling suddenly defensive. I did it because I knew someday our paths would cross professionally, and I needed to be prepared. So, what are you thinking now? That we warn Horizon off the acquisition? I shook my head. I'm thinking we acquire Quantum ourselves. Paul choked on his coffee. You want to buy your brother's company? The one he's been using to lord his success over you for years? I want to save a promising technology from poor management, I corrected, though we both knew there was more to it. Quantum's core innovation is actually brilliant. It's the implementation and business strategy that's failing. With our expertise and Horizon as an anchor client, we could turn it around. Paul studied me for a long moment. And the fact that it would put your brother in a position of reporting to you is just a happy coincidence? I met his gaze steadily. I'm not going to pretend there isn't personal satisfaction in the idea, but this is a sound business decision. Paul, the technology complements our service offerings, and we'd be acquiring a talented engineering team at a bargain price. How much of a bargain? Based on their burn rate and remaining capital, I estimate they've got about 4 months before they're insolvent. We could offer $15 million, far less than what Horizon is considering, and it would still be a lifeline for James. Paul whistled softly. That's a significant investment for us. We can afford it, I said confidently. Our last 3 quarters have been our best ever, and the Baker contract just renewed at a higher rate. Plus, Lisa has been after us to make an acquisition to diversify our service offerings. Speaking of Lisa, what does our legal counsel think? About you potentially acquiring your brother's company? Any conflict of interest concerns? I grimaced. I haven't told her yet. I wanted to run it by you first. Paul nodded, then pulled out his phone and sent a quick text. She'll meet us at the office in an hour. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. As we left the cafe, Paul put a hand on my shoulder. Emma, are you sure about this? Once you go down this road with James, there's no going back. I thought about all the years of condescension, the dismissive comments, the way James had systematically undermined my confidence at every turn. But I also thought about the brief glimpses of the brother I'd once adored, the one who had taught me to code when I was 8, who had defended me against bullies in elementary school before his own ambition had turned him into something unrecognizable. I'm sure, I said finally. It's time James learned what I'm really capable of. Back at the office, Lisa Chen was waiting for us, her expression curious. As our head of legal, Lisa had seen us through countless negotiations and contracts, but this would be different. Paul said you have an unconventional acquisition target, she began as we settled into the conference room. Quantum innovations, I stated, sliding my tablet across to her. They're in talks with Horizon, but I have reason to believe we could make a more compelling offer. Lisa scrolled through my files, her expression growing increasingly impressed. This is extensive due diligence. How long have you been watching them? A while, I admitted. What I haven't mentioned is that Quantum's CEO, James Wilson, is my brother. Lisa's head snapped up. Your brother, as in the brother who told you, and I quote, "You'll never understand how real tech companies operate at last year's Christmas dinner?" I winced. I'd forgotten about that particular dig. The very same. This is getting interesting. Lisa set down the tablet. Legally speaking, there's no inherent conflict of interest in acquiring a family member's company, provided all financial disclosures are properly made, and there's no breach of fiduciary duty to our existing clients. Oh, what about Horizon? Paul asked. They're already in acquisition talks with Quantum. Lisa thought for a moment. We'd need to be transparent with Horizon about our intentions, but given that we're their strategic technology advisor, we could position this as acting in their best interest, acquiring and stabilizing Quantum's technology before licensing it to Horizon under more favorable terms than they'd get through direct acquisition. Exactly my thinking, I nodded. The personal element complicates things, Lisa cautioned. James could claim you used privileged family information in the acquisition. Every piece of information I have came from public sources or professional interactions, I assured her. I've been careful about that. Lisa studied me carefully. This isn't just about business for you, is it? I hesitated, then decided honesty was best with my closest colleagues. No, it's not. James has spent our entire adult lives making me feel smaller than him. But my personal feelings don't change the fact that this is a smart business move for Martinez and Wilson. Lisa and Paul exchanged glances. If we do this, Paul said slowly, we do it by the book. Complete transparency with Horizon, fair terms for Quantum shareholders, and a clear integration plan that respects the talent we'd be acquiring. Agreed, I said immediately. And James? Lisa asked. What role would he have post-acquisition? I'd thought about this all night. Director of Innovation, reporting to me as managing partner. His technical vision paired with our execution expertise could be powerful. That is, if his ego can handle it. That's a big if, Paul remarked. It is, I acknowledged. But James isn't stupid. His company is running out of money, and Horizon will walk away once they complete their technical due diligence. We're offering him a soft landing and a chance to save face. Lisa nodded decisively. All right. I'll draft the initial offer documents. We should move quickly before Horizon progresses further with their discussions. As Lisa and Paul began outlining next steps, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Emma, it's Michael Thompson, CTO at Quantum. We need to talk privately. It's about James and Horizon. Can you meet today? I stared at the message in surprise. Michael Thompson was James's right-hand man, his fraternity brother from MIT and co-founder of Quantum. For him to reach out to me directly was unexpected, and potentially very informative. I need to step out for a bit, I told Paul and Lisa. Keep working on the preliminary documentation. I'll be back in a couple of hours. I suggested meeting Michael at a quiet coffee shop in Cambridge, far from both our offices. When I arrived, he was already there, nervously checking his watch. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, rumpled shirt, the posture of someone carrying a heavy burden. Thanks for meeting me, he said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I was intrigued, I admitted. It's not every day my brother's co-founder reaches out for a secret meeting. Michael grimaced. James doesn't know I'm here. He'd fire me on the spot if he found out. Then why risk it? He took a deep breath. Because Quantum is imploding, and James is in denial. The Horizon deal is our last hope, but it's built on promises we can't keep. The technical issues are that bad? Worse, Michael confirmed. We've been patching the system with temporary fixes for months. Half our engineering team has quit. The demo James showed Horizon yesterday? It was mostly smoke and mirrors. I leaned forward. Why tell me this? Michael looked me straight in the eye. Because unlike James, I actually read those industry profiles about Martinez and Wilson. I know what you've built. I know you could fix what's broken at Quantum. You're suggesting we acquire you instead of Horizon, I stated, impressed by his directness. I'm suggesting you save the technology we've poured 5 years of our lives into, he corrected. James has lost perspective. His pride is going to sink us all. Does he realize how precarious the situation is? Michael laughed bitterly. James Wilson admit failure? Never. He keeps insisting the next funding round will solve everything. The next big client will turn the tide. Meanwhile, we can barely make payroll next month. This was valuable intelligence, confirming what I had suspected but couldn't prove from outside the company. What would you expect in this hypothetical acquisition? A chance to finish what we started, Michael said simply. Most of our engineers are brilliant. They just need stable leadership and realistic timelines. As for me, I'd happily take a step back from management. I'm a technologist, not a businessman. And James? Would he accept reporting to his little sister? Michael winced. That's the impossible equation. His ego versus the company's survival. I may have a solution, I said thoughtfully. But I'll need your help navigating Quantum's actual technical state versus what James claims it to be. You have it, Michael promised. I can share our internal documentation and give you access to our development environment. But we need to move fast. Once Horizon's technical team digs deeper, they'll run for the hills. I'll need something else, I added. Quantum's current cap table and financial statements. Not the ones James shows investors, the real numbers. Michael hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'll get them to you today. As we parted ways, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Vindication that my assessment of Quantum had been correct, concern about the depth of their problems, and a growing confidence that this acquisition made even more sense than I had initially thought. Back at the office, I found Paul and Lisa still working on the acquisition strategy. We may have an ally inside Quantum, I told them, explaining my meeting with Michael. This changes things, Paul said, looking energized. With the CTO on, our side integration would be much smoother. Assuming James agrees to the acquisition, Lisa reminded us. He'll fight it, I said with certainty. But when faced with Quantum's collapse versus a respectable exit, even James will choose survival. Over the next 2 days, Michael discreetly shared Quantum's internal documents. The reality was even worse than he'd described. The company had less than 8 weeks of runway left, not the 4 months I had estimated. Their core technology was sound but buried under layers of hasty patches and technical debt. And most tellingly, James had begun quietly selling his own shares while publicly proclaiming confidence, a detail that made my blood boil. Armed with this information, we refined our acquisition strategy. The offer would be $12 million, not $15 million, reflecting the true state of Quantum's technology. We would retain the engineering team, but restructure the management, with Michael staying on as technical director and James shifting to a strategic role reporting to me. Before approaching James directly, I scheduled a meeting with Marcus Freeman, Horizon's CEO. If our plan was going to work, we needed to be transparent with our most important client. Marcus welcomed me into his corner office with obvious curiosity. Emma, your message sounded urgent. What's this about Quantum Innovations? I laid out our findings about Quantum's technical and financial issues. careful to emphasize that my information came from professional sources, not family connections. I then explained our proposed solution. Martinez and Wilson would acquire and stabilize Quantum, then partner with Horizon on the technology integration they actually needed. Marcus listened intently, occasionally asking incisive questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "You're suggesting we step back and let you acquire them instead?" "I'm suggesting a path that gives Horizon what it actually needs without the risks of a direct acquisition," I clarified. "The technology is valuable but needs significant work to be enterprise-ready. We're better positioned to manage that transformation." "And the fact that James Wilson is your brother? How does that factor in?" I appreciated his directness. "It complicates things personally, but simplifies them professionally. I understand Quantum's technology and culture better than most outside observers could. I also understand exactly what Horizon needs from this technology, given our long partnership." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've always appreciated your straightforward approach, Emma. It's refreshing in an industry full of hype men like your brother. No offense. None taken. James and I have very different professional styles." "That's putting it mildly," Marcus chuckled. "We've had 6 meetings with him, and I still can't get a straight answer about their technical architecture." I smiled, recognizing James's characteristic evasiveness. "So, what do you think of our proposal?" Marcus stood up and walked to his window, looking out over the Boston skyline. "Honestly, it's elegant. You solve your brother's problems, strengthen your firm's capabilities, and give us a more reliable path to the technology we need." He turned back to me. "But will James accept it?" "That remains to be seen," I admitted. "But with Horizon backing away from direct acquisition, his options will be limited." "Consider us backing away then," Marcus decided. "I'll inform the board this afternoon that we're exploring an alternative arrangement with Martinez and Wilson regarding Quantum's technology." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you, Marcus. I promise you won't regret this decision." "I rarely regret decisions that save us from costly mistakes," he replied with a wry smile. "Just make sure you can manage the family dynamics. Business is complicated enough without adding sibling rivalry to the mix." As I left Horizon's offices, I steeled myself for the next step, confronting James. This wouldn't be a casual conversation about childhood memories or family gossip. This would be a business negotiation with the highest personal stakes imaginable. I decided the conversation should happen on neutral ground, somewhere public enough to keep emotions in check but private enough for sensitive business discussion. I texted James. "Need to discuss your Horizon deal. Lunch tomorrow at Sorolina, 1 p.m.? His response came quickly. "What do you know about my Horizon deal?" "Never mind, lunch works. See you then." That night, I could barely sleep. I kept rehearsing the conversation, anticipating James's objections, preparing my responses. This wasn't just another negotiation. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed by the person whose approval I had once craved more than anything. By morning, I had reached a state of calm determination. I chose my outfit carefully, a charcoal gray suit that projected authority without flash, simple pearl earrings that had been our grandmother's. Professional, but with a reminder of our shared history. Lisa called as I was leaving my apartment. "The final offer documents are ready. Are you sure you want to do this in person? We could send them through official channels." "This needs to be face-to-face," I said firmly. "James needs to hear it from me." "Just remember, this is business," Lisa cautioned. "Don't let him make it personal." I nearly laughed at that. With James and me, everything had always been personal. But she was right. I needed to maintain professional composure, regardless of what James might say or do. Sorolina was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived, but our table was ready, a quiet corner spot I had specifically requested. I was 5 minutes early. James would be precisely on time, as always. Sure enough, at exactly 1 p.m. he strode through the door. Even from across the restaurant, I could see the strain beneath his confident facade, the slight tightness around his eyes, the too firm set of his jaw. He spotted me and approached, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Emma." He greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek. "You're looking well. Success suits you." "You too," I replied, though it wasn't entirely true. Up close, I could see the toll Quantum's troubles had taken on him, subtle signs of stress that only a sister would notice. We ordered drinks, sparkling water for me, a scotch for James. Despite the early hour, when the waiter left us alone, James leaned forward. "So, little sister, what's this about my Horizon deal? Don't tell me you're trying to consult for them, too." The condescension in his tone was so familiar it almost made me smile. James had never been able to acknowledge my success without diminishing it somehow. "Not exactly," I said calmly. "I'm their primary strategic technology partner, have been for the past 2 years." James blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "You?" Horizon works with enterprise-level firms, not boutique consultancies. Martinez and Wilson is the largest independent technology consultancy in New England, I corrected him. "We have over 200 employees now, and an impressive client roster, Horizon being our most significant engagement." I could see James recalibrating, his expression shifting as he processed this information. "Well, good for you. But what does that have to do with my acquisition discussions?" "Everything," I replied, taking a sip of water. "Horizon has asked for my assessment of Quantum's technology as part of their due diligence." James's face hardened. "That's a conflict of interest. You're my sister. Which is why I'm here talking to you directly. James, there are serious concerns about Quantum's technical viability and financial stability." "That's ridiculous," he scoffed, though I caught the flash of panic in his eyes. "Our technology is revolutionary." Horizon's technical team was impressed. "By a carefully orchestrated demo," I countered. "But what happens when they dig deeper? When they discover the scaling issues, the technical debt, the fact that half of what you promised doesn't actually exist yet?" James's knuckles whitened around his glass. "How would you know about any of that?" "I've done my homework," I said simply. "Just like I've done my homework on your financial situation. You have less than 8 weeks of runway left, James. The Horizon deal is your last hope, and it's not going to happen." For a moment, I thought he might explode. His face flushed, and a muscle twitched in his jaw. But then something unexpected happened. James seemed to deflate before my eyes. The carefully maintained facade crumbling. "They're backing out?" he asked quietly. "They're exploring alternatives," I confirmed, feeling a surprising pang of sympathy. "But I have a solution. One that saves Quantum's technology, protects your team, and gives you a graceful exit." I slid a folder across the table, the acquisition offer Lisa had prepared. James stared at it without opening it. "You want to buy Quantum," he stated flatly. "Martinez and Wilson wants to acquire Quantum's technology and talent," I corrected. "It's a fair offer, James. $12 million retention bonuses for your key engineers, and a director of innovation position for you. Reporting to you," he added, his voice hollow. "Yes." James finally opened the folder, scanning the terms with an unreadable expression. The restaurant continued to buzz around us, but our table felt suspended in a pocket of tense silence. After what seemed like an eternity, James looked up. "Why are you doing this, Emma? Revenge for all those times I dismissed your ideas? For telling you you'd never make it in this industry?" It was a fair question, one I had asked myself repeatedly over the past few days. Was this about proving James wrong? About finally gaining the upper hand in our lifelong competition? "Partially," I admitted, deciding honesty was the best approach. But it's also good business. Quantum has brilliant technology buried under poor execution. My firm can fix that. Horizon gets what they need without the risk. And you get to avoid bankruptcy. Everyone wins. Except my pride, James said with a bitter laugh. Pride doesn't make payroll, I replied gently. James took a long sip of his scotch, then set the glass down with deliberate care. You've been planning this for years, haven't you? Watching, waiting for me to stumble so you could swoop in and prove you were better all along. I shook my head. No, James. I've been building something real while you've been chasing the next big thing. The fact that our paths are crossing now is circumstance, not calculation. But you're enjoying it, he challenged. Admit it. I met his gaze steadily. Yes. After a lifetime of being told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, bold enough. Yes, there's satisfaction in being the one to offer you a lifeline. I'm human, James. To my surprise, James laughed. Not the cruel laugh I'd heard so often, but something more genuine, tinged with irony. You know what's funny? Dad always said you'd be the successful one. I stared at him in disbelief. What? Emma thinks things through, James mimicked our father's voice. Emma builds foundations while you build castles in the air. He told me that the day I dropped out of grad school to start my first company. This revelation stunned me. Our father had always seemed to favor James, to celebrate his bold moves while questioning my more methodical approach. Then why did I spend years acting like you'd never make it? James interrupted. Because I was terrified. He was right. He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture from childhood. You were always the careful one, the thorough one. I was all flash and inspiration, and deep down, I've always known which approach wins in the long run. I didn't know how to respond. This vulnerability from James was unprecedented, a glimpse of the insecurity behind the arrogance I'd resented for so long. The offer stands, I said finally, but I need your answer by tomorrow. Horizon won't wait forever. James nodded slowly, closing the folder. I need to talk to Michael and the board, but I appreciate your directness. As we parted outside the restaurant, James hesitated, then asked, If I accept, how would this work? Us working together after everything? Professionally, I replied. We're adults, James. We can separate personal history from business decisions. Can we? He wondered, more to himself than to me. I'll call you tomorrow. I watched him walk away, his shoulders straighter than when he'd arrived, as if some burden had shifted. Not lightened, perhaps, but redistributed. I felt the same transformation within myself, a complex mix of vindication, responsibility, and an unexpected glimmer of hope that perhaps, through this business transaction, we might find a new way to be siblings. The next day dawned bright and clear, a perfect Boston spring morning. I arrived at the office early, too restless to stay in my apartment waiting for James's call. Paul and Lisa joined me for a strategy session, preparing for either outcome. If he says no, Paul asked, we go back to Horizon with our concerns, I replied. They'll walk away from the acquisition, and Quantum will likely fold within 2 months. And if he says yes? I took a deep breath. Then we begin the most complicated integration process of our firm's history. My phone rang at precisely 90 a.m. James. I've discussed the offer with my board and key team members, he said without preamble, his voice carefully neutral. And? I prompted when he didn't continue. A long pause. Then, we accept the terms, with 2 conditions. I motioned for Paul and Lisa to listen in. Go on. First, we announce this as a strategic merger, not an acquisition. Optics matter, in this industry. It was a reasonable request, one that would help James save face. Acceptable. And the second condition? You and I have a standing monthly dinner, just us. No business talk allowed. If we're going to work together, we need to fix. He struggled for the words. Us. Of all the conditions I had anticipated, this wasn't one of them. It revealed a desire to repair our relationship that I hadn't thought James capable of acknowledging, much less suggesting. Agreed, I said, surprised by the emotion in my own voice. We'll start this Sunday. Then we have a deal, James concluded. I'll have our lawyers contact Lisa Chen to finalize the paperwork. After we hung up, Paul and Lisa looked at me expectantly. Quantum Innovations is now part of Martinez and Wilson, I announced, a complex swirl of emotions making it difficult to keep my voice steady. James is coming on as Director of Innovation. Paul clapped his hands together once, decisively. Then we have work to do. Lisa, get the legal team moving on the final documentation. I'll start on the integration plan with HR. As they left my office buzzing with plans, I remained seated, trying to process what had just happened. In 1 week, I had gone from accidentally discovering my brother's business troubles to becoming his boss. The victory I had imagined felt different than expected, less triumphant gloating, more sobering responsibility. My phone buzzed with a text from James. I never thought I'd work for my little sister. Life has a strange sense of humor. I smiled, typing back. Just remember, quarterly performance reviews are non-negotiable, even for family. His response came quickly. I wouldn't expect anything less. You always were the thorough one. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, his words held no sting, just a simple acknowledgement of truth. The journey ahead would be complicated, professionally and personally, but something fundamental had shifted between us. The brother who said I'd never amount to anything now reported to me, but more importantly, he might finally see me as an equal. And that, I realized, was worth more than any business acquisition could ever be. I should have known that my lunch with James wouldn't be the end of it. When I returned to my office, Lisa was waiting, a concerned expression on her face. Michael Thompson just called, she said without preamble. James is gathering his board for an emergency meeting tonight. He's looking for alternative funding to block our offer. I sank into my chair, unsurprised, but still disappointed. Of course he is. He'd rather sink the company than accept my help. It gets worse, Lisa continued. He's been calling around to our clients trying to dig up dirt on Martinez and Wilson. He specifically asked Westlake Financial if they were satisfied with our services. My blood ran cold. Westlake had been one of our earliest clients, a relationship that had survived several rocky patches. What did they tell him? Fortunately, their CIO is loyal. He called me immediately after James's call. Lisa sat across from me, her expression serious. Emma, this is escalating beyond normal acquisition resistance. James is trying to damage our reputation to avoid losing face. I stared out the window, watching gray clouds gather over Boston's skyline, mirroring my darkening mood. He always lashes out when he feels cornered. It was the same when we were kids. If he was losing at a game, he'd flip the board rather than admit defeat. This isn't a board game, Lisa reminded me. This is business, and what he's doing borders on defamation. I turned back to her. Do we have any legal recourse? We could file a cease and desist, threaten a lawsuit for interference with business relationships. But that would drag both companies through the mud, and it wouldn't help with the acquisition. Lisa hesitated, then added, There's another approach we could take. I'm listening. Michael is still on our side. He's worried James's desperation is going to destroy any chance for Quantum's technology to survive. He's offered to give us access to their complete financial records and technical documentation, everything Horizon would need to see exactly, why a direct acquisition would be disastrous. I frowned. Wouldn't that be crossing an ethical line? Not if we're transparent about it, Lisa replied. We disclosed to Horizon that we received this information from Quantum's CTO, who believes It's in the company's best interest to work with us rather than force a direct acquisition that would fail technical due diligence. It was a bold move, potentially risky, but also potentially decisive. And you think Horizon would still work with us after that kind of reveal? I think Marcus Freeman values honesty above all else. If we come clean about everything, your relationship to James, Michael's concerns, the technical issues with Quantum's platform, it positions us as the adults in the room. I considered this for a long moment. The situation had evolved beyond a simple business acquisition into something messier, more personal. James had escalated, and now I needed to decide how far I was willing to go in response. Get Paul in here, I finally said. This affects all of us, and we need to make this decision together. Paul arrived minutes later, concern evident on his face as Lisa briefed him on the situation. So James is actively trying to sabotage our reputation to avoid your acquisition, he summarized, shaking his head. I wish I could say I'm surprised. The question is how we respond, I said. Lisa believes we should get ahead of this by being completely transparent with Horizon, laying out everything, including the personal dynamics. Paul paced the office, thinking it through. It's risky. Marcus might question your judgment in mixing business with personal history. Or he might appreciate our honesty, Lisa countered. Better he hears everything from us than gets half-truths from James. There's a third option, I said quietly. Both of them turned to look at me. We walk away, drop the acquisition attempt, warn Horizon about the technical issues as part of our advisory role, and let Quantum fail on its own timeline. The room fell silent. It was the rational option, the one that would spare us the complications of entanglement with James. But something in me rebelled against it. That's not you, Emma, Paul said finally. You've never walked away from a challenge, and you've never abandoned a good idea just because it got difficult. Bacum Quantum's technology is worth saving, Lisa added, and their engineering team doesn't deserve to go down with James's ship. They were right, of course. Walking away might be easier, but it wasn't right, not for the business and not for me personally. This confrontation with James had been brewing for years, and retreating now would only postpone the inevitable. Okay, I decided. We go with full transparency. Set up a meeting with Marcus Freeman for tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I'll reach out to Michael and get whatever documentation he's willing to share. As Lisa and Paul left to make arrangements, I called Michael Thompson directly. I heard about James's emergency board meeting, I said when he answered. Michael sighed heavily. He's grasping at straws. He's approached 3 venture capital firms already, but no one's interested in a bridge round for a company with our burn, rate, and technical challenges. Is he aware you've been sharing information with me? No, but he's suspicious. He's been watching me like a hawk since your lunch meeting. Michael sounded exhausted. Look, Emma, I believe in what we built. At Quantum, the core technology could change how enterprise systems communicate. But James has lost perspective. It's all about his ego now, not the product. I understand, I said softly. More than you know. I can give you access to our complete technical documentation and financials, Michael offered. But you need to know what you're getting into. The technology needs at least 6 more months of development before it's truly enterprise-ready, and we have 8 weeks of cash left at— Well, so I'd send me everything, I told him. And Michael, thank you for putting the technology first. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, turning an old stress ball in my hand. A gift from my father when I was studying for the MCATs, before I'd decided to follow James into computer science instead of medicine. I'd kept it as a reminder of paths not taken, choices that shaped who I'd become. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emma, it's Sophie Wilson. I need to talk to you about James. I stared at the message in shock. Sophie was James's wife of 3 years, a brilliant architectural engineer I'd always admired but rarely spent time with, given my strained relationship with my brother. Of course, I replied. When and where? Her response was immediate. Can you meet at Render Coffee in an hour? Just you. James doesn't know I'm contacting you. This day was becoming increasingly complicated. I'll be there. Render Coffee was quieter than Tat, tucked away on a side street with softer lighting and more private corners. Sophie was already there when I arrived, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, her expression troubled. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat across from her. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and tension in her shoulders. Of course, I replied, studying her carefully. What's going on, Sophie? She took a deep breath. James isn't sleeping. He's barely eating. He paces the house all night talking about saving the company, about proving everyone wrong. Her voice cracked slightly. Last night he said he'd rather die than have his little sister bail him out. My stomach tightened. He's always been dramatic. This isn't drama, Emma. Sophie's eyes met mine, deadly serious. I'm worried about him. Really worried. This isn't just about business anymore. It's about his identity, his self-worth. If Quantum fails and you succeed, I don't know what he'll do. The implications of her concern weren't lost on me. Has he threatened self-harm? Not explicitly, but he's said things like, there's no coming back from this, and I can't face everyone if this happens. She wrapped her arms around herself. I'm scared, Emma, and I don't know who else to talk to about this. I sat back, the weight of responsibility suddenly much heavier than before. This acquisition had been about business strategy and, yes, some personal vindication. I hadn't considered it might push James to a breaking point. What do you want me to do, Sophie? I asked quietly. Walk away from the acquisition? She shook her head. No. Actually, the opposite. I think you need to move faster. This limbo is killing him. The uncertainty, the scrambling for alternatives, the desperate hope that he can still save face. He needs this to be over one way or another. It wasn't the response I'd expected. You want me to push the acquisition through? I want you to force a resolution, Sophie clarified. James respects you more than he admits. Deep down, he knows you're the right person to save what he's built. But his pride won't let him accept it while he still sees alternatives, no matter how unlikely. So I need to eliminate the alternatives, I murmured, understanding dawning. And you need to give him a role that preserves his dignity, Sophie added. He needs to feel like he's still contributing, that his vision is still valued, even if he's not in charge anymore. I studied Sophie with new appreciation. She understood James perhaps better than I ever had, seeing beyond his arrogance to the insecurity that drove it. Thank you for telling me this, I said sincerely. I had no idea things had gotten so serious. Sophie offered a sad smile. Family is complicated, but James talks about you more than you'd think. Usually when he's comparing himself to you, wondering how you always manage to make the right decisions while he's always chasing the next big thing. This revelation stunned me. He says that? When he's being honest with himself, yes. Sophie reached across the table, briefly touching my hand. You two are more alike than either of you will admit. Both brilliant, both stubborn, both desperate for validation. You just chose different paths to seek it. As we parted outside the coffee shop, Sophie hugged me unexpectedly. Save his company, Emma, but find a way to save his pride too. That's the real challenge here. I walked back to my office deep in thought, Sophie's words echoing in my mind. The stakes had risen dramatically. This wasn't just about business strategy or sibling rivalry anymore. It was about James's mental health, his fundamental sense of self. By the time I reached my building, a new approach had crystallized in my mind. I texted Paul and Lisa. Change of plans. Meet in my office ASAP. When they arrived, I outlined what I'd learned from Sophie and the new strategy I believed we needed to pursue. Instead of approaching this as an acquisition where James reports to me, we position it as a true merger of equals, I explained. Martinez and Wilson brings the business acumen and client relationships. Quantum brings the innovative technology. James and I become co-directors of the new innovation division, with clearly defined complementary responsibilities. Paul frowned. But in reality, you'd still be his boss. You're a managing partner here. In the organizational chart, yes, but in practice, we'd create a structure where James has genuine autonomy over technical vision and product development, while I oversee strategy and client integration. I leaned forward, emphasizing my point. This isn't just optics. It's a functional division of responsibilities that plays to our respective strengths. Lisa looked thoughtful. It's unusual, but it could work. From a legal perspective, we'd still need to structure it as an acquisition given Quantum's financial position, but the integration could be positioned as a merger of equals. What about the financial terms? Paul asked. Does this change? Our offer? I nodded. Same total value, but different structure. Instead of a straightforward cash acquisition, we offer a combination of cash and equity in the expanded Martinez and Wilson, with performance incentives tied to the success of the integrated technology. Giving James skin in the game, Lisa nodded appreciatively. And a path to vindication if the technology succeeds under the new structure. Exactly. We're not just buying his company. We're investing in his vision while providing the business framework it needs to succeed. I stood up, feeling more confident in this approach. This isn't about me winning and James losing anymore. It's about creating something better than either of us could build alone. Paul studied me for a long moment. You're sure about this? After everything James has said and done? I thought about Sophie's words, about the brother who compared himself to me in private while dismissing me in public. I'm sure. This isn't just what James needs. It's what the technology deserves and ultimately what's best for our firm. Lisa nodded decisively. I'll redraft the proposal with these changes. When do you want to present it to James? As soon as possible, I replied. We need to move before his desperation pushes him to do something we'll all regret. As they left to implement the new plan, I called Marcus Freeman to reschedule our meeting for later in the day. Then I sat down to compose an email to James, not a formal business communication, but a personal message from sister to brother. James, I wrote, before you receive our revised proposal later today, I wanted to reach out personally. This situation has evolved beyond business strategy into something more fundamental about our relationship and shared history. We've spent our adult lives competing for recognition, for success, for our parents' approval. It's driven us both to achieve more than we might have otherwise, but it's also prevented us from seeing what we could accomplish together. Quantum's technology is brilliant, James. Its vision is exactly what the industry needs. What it lacks is the business infrastructure and client relationships to bring that vision to reality before the runway ends. Martinez and Wilson has built that infrastructure, those relationships, but we've been looking for exactly the kind of technical innovation Quantum offers. Our new proposal isn't about one of us winning and the other losing. It's about recognizing that we're strongest together, combining your technical brilliance with my business acumen. I'm not looking to be your boss, James. I'm looking to be your partner in building something neither of us could create alone. Whatever you decide, I want you to know I've always admired your vision and your willingness to take risks I was too cautious to consider. Maybe it's time we both admitted we need what the other offers. Think about it. Emma. I read it twice, wondering if I was being naive, if James would see this as weakness rather than an olive branch. But Sophie's concerns had shifted my perspective. This wasn't just business anymore, it was family. And family was worth the risk of vulnerability. I hit send, then turned to the task of preparing for my meeting with Marcus Freeman. Within the hour, my phone chimed with an email notification. James had responded. Emma, I need to think about this, but I appreciate the sentiment more than you know. Let me see the proposal. J. It wasn't enthusiastic acceptance, but it wasn't dismissive rejection either. Coming from James, it was practically effusive. My meeting with Marcus Freeman later that afternoon went better than I had dared hope. When I explained the revised approach, transparency about my relationship with James, the technical realities of Quantum's platform, and our proposed merger of equals, he listened attentively. So, instead of Horizon acquiring problematic technology, directly, we'd partner with a strengthened Martinez and Wilson that incorporates Quantum's innovation under more stable management, he summarized when I finished. Exactly, I confirmed. You get the technology integration you need without the acquisition risks, and we deliver a more comprehensive solution based on a rock-solid foundation. Marcus tapped his pen against his desk, considering. And your brother? He's on board. With this arrangement? He's reviewing the proposal now, I said cautiously. It's designed to respect his technical vision while providing the business framework necessary for success. Family business can be complicated, Marcus observed, studying me. Are you sure you can separate personal history from professional decisions? It was the question I'd been anticipating. James and I have different approaches, different strengths. For years, we've seen that as a source of competition. This arrangement transforms it into complementary capabilities. The personal history. It complicates things, yes, but it also gives us insights into how to work effectively together. Marcus nodded slowly. I've always appreciated your forthright approach, Emma. Most consultants would have hidden the family connection or the technical issues until after contracts were signed. He leaned back in his chair. Horizon will support this arrangement. In fact, I think it's preferable to our original acquisition plan. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Marcus. Your trust means a lot. Just promise me one thing, he added as I stood to leave. When the sibling arguments happen, and they will, keep them behind closed doors. Horizon needs stability from this technology partnership. I smiled. Agreed. Some things should remain family business. As I left Horizon's offices, my phone rang. It was James. I've reviewed the proposal, he said without preamble, his voice carefully neutral. It's more generous than I expected. It's what makes business sense, I replied, matching his tone. Your technology with our business? Infrastructure is a powerful combination. A pause, then. Sophie told me she met with you. My stomach tightened. She's worried about you. So am I. I'm fine, he said automatically, then sighed. No, that's not true. This has been difficult, more than I expected. The admission of vulnerability from James was unprecedented. I chose my next words carefully. The technology you've built is worth saving, James, and you're worth more than Quantum's success or failure. Another long pause. Can we meet? Just us, no lawyers or partners. I need to ask you something face to face. Of course. Where and when? The Charles River Path, by the Weeks Footbridge. 7 tonight? It was an odd choice, a public, walking path rather than a restaurant or office. But it held significance for us. We'd walked that path countless times during our college years at Harvard and MIT, having some of our most honest conversations away from the pressure of classrooms and family expectations. I'll be there, I promised. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparations. Lisa finalized the legal documents for our revised proposal. Paul briefed our leadership team on the potential integration. I found myself checking the clock, repeatedly both dreading and anticipating my meeting with James. At 6:45, I left the office and walked the short distance to the river. The evening was cool but clear, the setting sun casting long shadows across the water. I spotted James already waiting by the bridge, hands in his pockets, staring out at the river. "Hey," I said quietly as I approached. He turned, his expression unreadable. "Thanks for coming." We fell into step naturally, walking along the path as we had so many times before. For several minutes, neither of us spoke, the only sounds the distant traffic and the gentle lapping of water against the riverbank. "Do you remember when we used to walk here during midterms?" James finally asked. "You were always so stressed, convinced you'd fail despite being top of your class." I smiled at the memory. "And you were always so confident, even when you'd barely studied." "I just hid my anxiety better," he admitted. "I was terrified of disappointing Dad." "We both were," I acknowledged. "Different approaches, same underlying fear." James stopped walking, turning to face me directly. "That's what I needed to ask you, Emma. Is this proposal, this merger of equals, genuine? Or is it just a more palatable way of taking over my company when I'm vulnerable?" It was a fair question, one I'd been expecting. "It's genuine," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "The original acquisition plan was business-driven, but yes, there was personal satisfaction in the idea of you reporting to me after years of dismissing my abilities." James winced but didn't interrupt. "This new approach is still business-driven, but it's also recognition that we're stronger together than apart," I continued. "Your technical vision, my business acumen, it's not about one of us winning anymore. It's about building something neither of us could create alone." James studied me carefully, seeming to weigh my sincerity. "And you'd really be comfortable with me having autonomy over technical direction, even when we inevitably disagree?" "Professionally? Yes," I said honestly. "I trust your technical instincts, James. I always have. What I don't trust is your business judgment or your ability to manage growth sustainably. That's where I come in." He nodded slowly, resuming our walk. "The merger terms are more than fair, better than we deserve, given Quantum's financial situation." "The financial situation is temporary," I replied. "The technological innovation is what matters long-term." We walked in silence for another minute before James spoke again, his voice quieter than before. "I've been unfair to you. For years, I've dismissed your achievements, minimized your success, acted like my approach was the only valid path." The admission stunned me into momentary silence. James had never acknowledged any fault in our competitive relationship. "Why?" I finally asked. He shrugged, a gesture that tried for casualness but couldn't quite achieve it. "Because you terrified me." "I terrified you," I echoed incredulously. "How?" "You were always so methodical, so thorough. When you commit to something, you build it right, from the ground up. I've always been the opposite, all big ideas and rapid execution, but shaky foundations." James stared out at the darkening water. "Every time you succeeded, it highlighted everything I was insecure about in myself." The revelation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of our relationship. All these years, I'd thought, James dismissed me because he genuinely believed I was less capable. The possibility that his behavior stemmed from insecurity rather than contempt had never occurred to me. "I envied you too," I admitted quietly. "Your confidence, your willingness to take risks, the way people naturally follow your vision. I've had to work twice as hard for half the recognition you get just by walking into a room." James turned to me, a sad smile playing at his lips. "Quite a pair, aren't we? Each envying what the other has, neither appreciating our own strengths." "Maybe that's why this merger makes sense," I suggested. "Not just as a business strategy, but as a way to finally put our complementary strengths together instead of using them against each other." He nodded slowly, then extended his hand formally. "Partners, then, For real this time. I took his hand, feeling the weight of years of competition and misunderstanding begin to lift. Partners. As we shook hands, James added, "But I have one condition that's not in the formal proposal." "What's that?" "Sunday dinners with Mom and Dad, together. We tell them about the merger as a joint decision, a collaborative success." His expression turned wry. "No more letting them pit us against each other, intentionally or not." It was a perceptive observation. Our parents had always compared us, praising James's bold entrepreneurship while questioning my more cautious approach. Those comparisons had fueled our competitive dynamic from childhood. "Agreed," I said firmly. "It's time we present a united front." As we walked back toward the city lights now glowing against the darkening sky, I felt a sense of closure mixed with new beginning. The brother who had said I'd never amount to anything was now acknowledging me as an equal, a partner. The next morning, we gathered in the Martinez and Wilson conference room, James and Michael from Quantum, Paul, Lisa, and me representing our firm. The mood was serious, but notably lacking the tension I had anticipated. "Before we sign," James said, addressing the room, "I want to acknowledge something. This arrangement isn't what I had envisioned for Quantum's future, but it's the right path forward. Emma's insight into what our technology needs to succeed has been invaluable." The admission clearly cost him something, but his voice was steady, his gaze direct. "Quantum's vision is extraordinary," I responded, matching his professional tone. "What Martinez and Wilson brings is the infrastructure to make that vision a reality. This truly is a merger of complementary strengths." The signing itself was anticlimactic. A series of signatures on legal documents, handshakes, brief congratulations. The real work of integration would begin immediately afterward, with teams from both companies meeting to plan the transition. As people began to file out, James lingered behind, waiting until we were alone in the conference room. "So," he said, glancing around at what was now partly his company, "my little sister's all grown up and saving my ass." I laughed, the tension of the past weeks finally breaking. "Don't worry, I won't tell Dad." "Actually," James replied with unexpected seriousness, "I think it's time we both told Dad a lot of things. Starting with how his constant comparisons nearly destroyed our relationship." I studied my brother with new appreciation. Perhaps this merger would heal more than just Quantum's balance sheet. "Sunday dinner is going to be interesting," I observed. James smiled, a genuine smile without the competitive edge I'd grown so accustomed to seeing. "For once, we'll be on the same side of the table, literally and figuratively." As we walked out together, I realized the most surprising outcome of this business confrontation wasn't that James's company now reported to me. It was that after decades of competition, my brother and I were finally facing the world as allies instead of rivals. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights reflect on the Charles River, a glass of wine in hand and the signed merger documents on the table beside me. My phone chimed with a text from Sophie. "Thank you. He's sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks." I smiled, typing back, "Partners make better siblings than competitors." Her response came quickly. "About time you both figured that out. Family dinner Sunday?" "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my wine and reflecting on the unexpected journey of the past 2 weeks. What had begun as an accidental discovery in a boardroom had evolved into a transformation of my most defining relationship. The brother who said I'd never amount to anything now recognized me as an equal partner. His company didn't just report to me, it was merging with mine to create something stronger than either of us could have built alone. Sometimes I realized the most meaningful victories aren't about proving someone wrong. They're about finding a new way forward that turns old rivalries into powerful alliances. James and I had spent our lives competing for the same validation. Now, perhaps, we could find it in the success we built together. I raised my glass to the night sky in a silent toast. To new beginnings, to partnerships, to family. Complicated, challenging, and finally, collaborative. The day of our revised proposal presentation arrived with gray skies and a steady drizzle that matched my unsettled mood. I stood at my office window, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass while waiting for confirmation that James and Quantum's board members had arrived in our conference room. My phone buzzed with a text from Paul. "They're here, James. Looks like he hasn't slept in days." I took a deep breath, smoothing down my navy blue suit jacket. This meeting would determine not just the future of two companies, but potentially the course of my relationship with James for years to come. The revised merger proposal addressed the business concerns, but the personal dynamics remained unpredictable. "On my way," I texted back. As I walked down the hallway toward the conference room, Lisa fell into step beside me, legal folders tucked under her arm. "Everything's in order," she assured me. "The terms are clear, the financials defensible, and the management structure gives both of you meaningful autonomy while preserving necessary oversight." "And Horizon?" "Marcus called this morning to reconfirm their support for our approach. They're prepared to increase their contract with the merged entity by 30%. I nodded, grateful for Lisa's thoroughness. "How many Quantum board members showed up?" "All 5, plus Michael and their lead engineer, Alexis Rivera. The full contingent, a positive sign, suggesting they were taking our proposal seriously, despite James's resistance." "And James?" I couldn't help asking. Lisa hesitated briefly. "Combative. He insisted on sitting at the head of the table until Paul reminded him it's our conference room." Typical James, establishing dominance through physical positioning. Some things never changed. We paused outside the conference room door. Lisa gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. "Remember, this isn't personal today. It's business." We both knew that wasn't entirely true, but I appreciated the reminder to maintain professional focus. I squared my shoulders and pushed open the door. The tension in the room was immediately palpable. James sat rigidly on one side of the long mahogany table, flanked by Quantum's board members, 3 venture capitalists, and 2 industry veterans who had backed his vision from the beginning. Michael Thompson sat slightly apart, his expression carefully neutral. Alexis Rivera, Quantum's brilliant lead engineer, looked uncomfortable and out of place in the corporate setting, her usual vibrant energy subdued. Paul rose to make introductions, but I noted how everyone's eyes tracked me as I moved to my place at the table. I was the unknown variable in this equation, the sister who had suddenly become a potential corporate savior, or adversary. James met my gaze briefly before looking away, but that glimpse was enough to confirm Sophie's concerns. His eyes were bloodshot, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. This wasn't just business for him, it was existential. "Thank you all for coming," I began, keeping my voice steady and professional. "We're here today to discuss a revised proposal that we believe represents the best path forward for both Martinez and Wilson and Quantum Innovations." I nodded to Lisa, who distributed folders to everyone at the table. "What you're receiving is not simply an acquisition offer," I continued. "It's a framework for a true strategic merger that preserves and enhances Quantum's technological vision while providing the business infrastructure necessary for sustainable growth." Victor Chen, Quantum's lead investor, opened his folder first, scanning the executive summary with the practiced efficiency of someone who evaluated dozens of deals monthly. "This is substantially different from what we understood was on the table," he observed, glancing between James and me. "You're proposing co-leadership of a new innovation division?" "That's correct," I confirmed. James would continue to guide technical vision and product development, while I would oversee client integration and business strategy. It's a structure that leverages our complementary strengths. "Complementary," James repeated, speaking for the first time, his tone making the word sound like an accusation. An interesting choice of terminology. I kept my expression neutral. It's an accurate one. Quantum's technical innovation is groundbreaking, but it requires a stable business foundation to reach its potential. Martinez and Wilson has built that foundation with enterprise clients like Horizon Dynamics, who are prepared to significantly increase their contract with the merged entity. This information caused a ripple of interest among the board members. Janice Winters, the most financially conservative of Quantum's investors, leaned forward. "Increase by how much?" she asked. 30%, Lisa supplied, with a 3-year commitment. Victor whistled softly. That alone nearly justifies the merger. Throughout this exchange, James remained silent, his jaw tight as he flipped through the proposal documents. I could read the conflict on his face, recognition of the business logic warring with personal resistance. Finally, he looked up. "Why the change in approach? Your original offer would have made me a subordinate. Now you're proposing partnership. What changed?" It was a direct challenge, one that pushed our agreement to keep things strictly business. The room fell silent, all eyes shifting between us, the underlying sibling dynamic suddenly front and center. I could have deflected, referenced market conditions or strategic reconsiderations, but something told me honesty was the only approach that might break through James's defenses. "Several things changed," I replied evenly. "I learned more about Quantum's technology and recognized that your continued leadership in its development is essential. I consulted with Horizon and understood better what they actually need from this integration. And..." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. I had conversations that helped me see beyond the business transaction to the human implications. James held my gaze, searching for insincerity or manipulation. Finding none, he gave a slight nod. "The financial terms are more favorable than your previous offer," Janice noted, redirecting the conversation to safer ground. "But the equity component creates ongoing entanglement that some might find concerning given your personal history." "The equity structure aligns incentives for long-term success," Lisa explained. "Both parties benefit if the merged technology thrives, which we believe is more likely under collaborative leadership than either company could achieve alone." "And the reporting structure?" Michael asked, speaking up for the first time. "How would that work day to day?" Paul pulled up a slide showing an organizational chart. The innovation division would operate with significant autonomy within Martinez and Wilson's overall structure. James and Emma would jointly lead the division, with clear delineation of responsibilities. Technical teams would report to James, business and client integration teams to Emma, with collaborative decision-making on matters affecting both domains. I watched Michael study the chart, noting the slight relaxation in his posture. The structure preserved his reporting line to James for technical matters while creating a path for the business stability Quantum desperately needed. Alexis Rivera, who had remained silent until now, raised her hand hesitantly. "What about our current development roadmap? We're 6 months into a critical architecture overhaul." It was a question directed at me, but I turned to James. This is exactly the kind of technical direction that would remain under James's purview. My role would be ensuring that development priorities align with client needs and business sustainability, not dictating technical approaches. James nodded, seemingly despite himself. "The roadmap continues, if anything, with more resources behind it." Victor Chen closed his folder decisively. "I'd like the board to discuss this privately. Could we have the room for 30 minutes? "Of course," I agreed, standing. "We'll be in the adjacent conference room when you're ready." As our teams filed out, James lingered, waiting until we were the last two in the room. "This isn't what I expected from you," he said quietly. "What did you expect?" "A hostile takeover, public humiliation, the chance to finally prove you were right and I was wrong." His voice held no accusation, just weary resignation. That was never the goal, James. He raised an eyebrow skeptically. Okay, I amended. Maybe there was some satisfaction in the idea initially, but this isn't about winning or losing anymore. It's about saving something valuable that we can build together. James studied me for a long moment. Sophie talked to you? It wasn't a question, and I didn't treat it as one. She cares about you. So do I, believe it or not. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The jury's still out on that. He gestured toward the door. They're waiting for us. We joined our respective teams in the adjacent room, where Paul was already strategizing next steps while Lisa reviewed contingencies. The 30 minutes stretched to 45, then an hour. I tried not to interpret the delay as a negative sign, but tension built with each passing minute. Finally, Michael appeared at the door. They're ready for you. When we returned to the main conference room, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. Victor Chen was now seated at the center of Quantum's side, with James moved to his right, a telling reorganization of the power dynamic. We've reviewed your proposal thoroughly, Victor began, all business. The board recognizes its merits, particularly given Quantum's current runway limitations and the significant opportunity with Horizon Dynamics. My pulse quickened. This sounded promising. However, Victor continued, we have several substantive concerns that would need to be addressed before we could recommend acceptance. James's expression remained carefully neutral, but I caught the slight straightening of his posture, hope mingled with caution. Victor outlined their concerns methodically. The valuation seemed low given Quantum's intellectual property portfolio. The equity distribution didn't adequately compensate for future value creation. The governance structure needed clearer dispute resolution mechanisms given the unique personal dynamics involved. Each point was reasonable, negotiable, and, I suspected, designed to give James a face-saving path to acceptance while demonstrating the board's diligent representation of shareholder interests. When Victor finished, all eyes turned to me. These are constructive concerns, I acknowledged. I believe we can address each one while maintaining the core principles of the merger. I turned to Lisa. Could you outline our flexibility on these points? Lisa efficiently walked through potential adjustments, a modest increase in valuation balanced by performance milestones, expanded equity options for key Quantum personnel, a formal governance structure with independent mediation provisions. As she spoke, I watched James carefully. His expression gave little away, but I sensed the internal conflict gradually resolving. The business case was becoming harder to resist, and the revised structure preserved his dignity and role in ways the original acquisition would not have. When Lisa finished, Victor turned to James. As Quantum's founder and CEO, we value your perspective on this revised approach. The room fell silent. This was the moment of truth, where James would either embrace the merger as a collaborative solution or reject it as a personal defeat. James took a measured breath. The business case is compelling, he began carefully. Our runway is shorter than most of you realize, and traditional funding options have become challenging. The Horizon opportunity is significant, but our current infrastructure can't support proper implementation within their timeframe. He paused, glancing briefly at me before continuing. The merger structure preserves our technological vision while providing the stability we need. If the board is satisfied with the adjusted terms, I'm prepared to move forward. The collective relief in the room was almost palpable. Months of uncertainty crystallized into a path forward in those few sentences. Victor nodded, businesslike. We'll need the revised terms in writing for final review, but in principle, we have agreement to proceed. The next hour passed in a blur of logistics and next steps. Legal teams would finalize documents over the weekend. Integration planning would begin Monday. A joint announcement was scheduled for the following Thursday, after key clients and team members had been personally briefed. Throughout these discussions, James participated actively but maintained a professional distance. Only once did our eyes meet across the table, a brief, unguarded moment where I caught a glimpse of something like relief behind his carefully constructed facade. As the meeting concluded and people began gathering their materials, Alexis Rivera approached me hesitantly. "I have a team of 20 engineers who've poured their hearts into this technology," she said quietly. "They need to know their work will continue, that this isn't just a talent acquisition where the product gets shelved." Her loyalty to the vision touched me. "I give you my word," I told her. "The technology is why we're here. Martinez and Wilson needs Quantum's innovation as much as Quantum needs our business infrastructure." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "James has always spoken highly of your integrity, even when he was complaining about everything else." The revelation surprised me. "He talked about me?" Alexis smiled slightly. "More than you'd think, usually when he needed a reality check on business decisions. Emma would say we're scaling too fast, or Emma would insist on more testing before launch." I struggled to reconcile this with the brother who publicly dismissed my business acumen at every opportunity. I had no idea. "He wouldn't want you to know," Alexis replied simply, before returning to gather her things. As the room gradually emptied, James remained seated, reviewing the draft announcement with uncharacteristic attention to detail. I approached cautiously, aware that we were entering uncharted territory in our relationship. "That went better than expected," I offered. James looked up, his expression unreadable. "The board was always going to accept. They've been looking for an exit strategy since our last funding round fell short. And you? Are you truly on board or just going along with the inevitable?" He set down his pen, considering the question with unexpected seriousness. "I've spent 5 years building Quantum. Watching it die would be worse than seeing it change under new leadership." He paused, especially when that leadership includes someone who actually understands the technology. Coming from James, this was tantamount to effusive praise. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "Co-leading a division with your little sister wasn't exactly in my 5-year plan. There will be adjustment periods." I smiled despite myself. "I'm counting on it." Easy would be suspicious. "A ghost?" A smile touched his lips before he turned serious again. "There's something you should know before we finalize this. Something that isn't in any of the documentation or due diligence materials." My guard instantly rose. "What kind of something?" "Quantum has been developing a secondary technology platform, an offshoot of our main architecture but with potentially broader applications. It's early stage, pre-patent, kept entirely separate from our primary development track." This was significant, a major asset or liability not disclosed during negotiations. "Why keep it secret?" "Because it was personal," James replied. "A project I started based on concepts you and I discussed years ago, during that Christmas break when we actually got along for a few days." The memory surfaced immediately, a rare period of collaborative brainstorming during a snowstorm that had stranded us both at our parents' house. For 3 days, we'd sketched ideas on paper napkins and debated implementation approaches without our usual competitive edge. "The distributed authentication protocol," I realized. "You actually built it?" James nodded. "A working prototype at least. It's nowhere near production ready, but the preliminary results are promising. I was saving it as a backup plan if our primary platform failed." "Why tell me now?" "Because it should be part of the merger," he said simply. "It deserves the chance to be developed properly, and honestly, it's always been as much your idea as mine." The admission stunned me. Not just the existence of the secret project, but James's willingness to acknowledge my contribution to its conceptual foundation. This wasn't the brother who had dismissed my ideas and abilities for years. This was the James I had glimpsed occasionally throughout our lives, capable of genuine collaboration and surprising generosity. "We'll need to disclose this to the board," I said finally. "I know. I'll handle it." He gathered his materials, preparing to leave. "Sunday dinner at Mom and Dad's still on?" "Absolutely. United Front, remember?" James nodded. "I'll bring Sophie. You should bring someone too. Might help distribute some of the inevitable attention." As he reached the door, I called after him. "James? Thank you for telling me about the project." He paused, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "Some bridges are worth rebuilding." Then he was gone, leaving me to contemplate how completely our dynamic had shifted in just 1 week. The following days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Legal teams finalized merger documents. Lisa and Paul orchestrated a meticulous communication plan for clients, employees, and the market. I spent hours with Alexis and Michael, diving deeper into Quantum's technology to understand how it would integrate with our existing systems. James participated in all key meetings, gradually shifting from reluctant acquiescence to active engagement. His technical insights were genuinely valuable, his understanding of Quantum's architecture essential to planning the integration. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of what might have been if we had found a way to collaborate years earlier. Sunday arrived with unexpected nervousness on my part. Dinner with our parents would be the first true test of our new united front, and the first time in years that James and I would present ourselves as allies rather than competitors. I arrived at their Cambridge home 15 minutes early, a bottle of our father's favorite wine in hand. To my surprise, James's car was already in the driveway. He was typically precisely on time, never early. Inside, I found him in the kitchen with our mother, chopping vegetables while she prepared a roast. The domesticity of the scene was so unexpected I paused in the doorway. "Emma," Mom greeted me warmly. "James was just telling me you two have some news to share." I shot him a questioning look. We had agreed to wait until dinner. "Just that we have news," James clarified. "Not what it is. Though Dad's been trying to pry it out of me for the last 20 minutes. Mom wiped her hands on a towel. "He's convinced one of you is moving away. He's in his study, pretending not to be anxious about it." I laughed despite myself. Our father, a retired economics professor, prided himself on emotional stoicism while being entirely transparent to those who knew him well. "I'll go say hello," I offered, leaving James to his surprisingly competent vegetable preparation. I found Dad at his desk, pretending to read academic journals while obviously watching the driveway through his window. "Planning an escape route?" I teased from the doorway. He looked up, genuine warmth spreading across his features. "Emma, you're early." "So is James. Shocking development." Dad removed his reading glasses, studying me with the penetrating gaze that had intimidated generations of Harvard undergraduates. "You two have synchronized your arrivals. Should I be concerned?" "Not concerned. Perhaps intrigued." His eyebrows rose. "Curiouser and curiouser. Well, come in properly. Tell me how things are at the firm." We fell into comfortable conversation about Martinez and Wilson's recent projects, carefully avoiding any mention of Quantum or the pending merger. Dad had always been interested in my work, though he sometimes questioned my business approaches in ways that echoed James's criticisms. Eventually, Mom called us for dinner. Sophie had arrived while I was with Dad, and the 5 of us gathered around the dining table where so many competitive family dynamics had played out over the years. Mom raised her glass. "To having both my children home together. A rarer pleasure than it should be." We clinked glasses, the undercurrent of her gentle admonishment not lost on either James or me. Our professional rivalry had spilled over into family gatherings too often, creating tension that our parents navigated with varying degrees of success. Conversation flowed surprisingly easily through the appetizer. Updates on Sophie's architectural projects, Mom's community volunteering, Dad's reluctant adjustment to retirement. The elephant in the room remained unaddressed until Mom finished serving the main course and fixed both James and me with an expectant look. "All right, you two. You've been exchanging glances all evening. What's this news you're so carefully coordinating?" James looked at me, silently deferring to my lead. Another surprising shift in our dynamic. I took a breath and placed my fork down deliberately. "Martinez and Wilson is merging with Quantum Innovations," I stated simply. The agreement was finalized Friday. The statement hung in the air for a moment as our parents processed its implications. "Merging?" Dad repeated carefully. "Not acquiring?" "A true strategic merger," James confirmed. "Martinez and Wilson provides the business infrastructure and client relationships. Quantum contributes technological innovation and product vision." "And the leadership structure?" Dad asked, ever focused on the power dynamics. "We'll co-lead a new innovation division," I explained. "James directing technical development, me overseeing client integration and business strategy." Mom looked between us, clearly trying to reconcile this collaborative arrangement with the competitive siblings she knew. "You two will be working together? Directly?" "That's the plan," James replied, a hint of amusement in his voice at her obvious skepticism. "What prompted this?" Dad asked. "Last I heard you were both running successful but entirely separate companies." James and I exchanged glances, silently negotiating how much of the truth to share. The financial pressures on Quantum, the accidental meeting at Horizon, the complex emotional journey of the past 2 weeks. How much of this belonged at the family dinner table? "Market conditions have changed," James offered diplomatically. "Consolidation makes strategic sense for both companies. And we've finally acknowledged that our approaches are complementary rather than contradictory," I added. "James's technical vision with my business execution creates something stronger than either company could build alone." Dad studied us, both clearly sensing there was more to the story. "This seems like a rather sudden realization after years of professional rivalry." "Sometimes clarity comes all at once," Sophie interjected, supporting the united front. "They've both built impressive companies. Combining forces is brilliant business strategy." Mom reached across the table, taking one of my hands and one of James's. "I don't care about the business reasons. I'm just happy to see you two collaborating instead of competing. It's been painful watching you grow further apart each year." Her candor created a moment of uncomfortable silence. Our parents had rarely commented directly on the competitive dynamic between us, choosing instead to navigate around the tension. "We should have done this years ago," James admitted, surprising me with his openness. "But it probably took building separate successes before we could truly appreciate what each of us brings to the table. And some perspective," I added, understanding that different approaches can be equally valid in different contexts. Dad leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, this reminds me of a pattern I've observed in economic systems. Competing entities often drive initial innovation through rivalry, but sustainable growth typically emerges from collaborative integration of complementary strengths." "Are you comparing us to economic theory, Dad?" James asked, amused. "If the model fits," Dad replied with a shrug. "I'm just pleased to see wisdom prevailing over pride. It's a transition many never manage to make." "We're still working on it," I admitted. "Co-leadership will have its challenges, but worth facing together," James added, meeting my gaze with unexpected sincerity. The moment felt significant, a public declaration of our new alliance witnessed by the people who had shaped both our competitive and collaborative instincts from childhood. As dinner progressed to dessert, the conversation shifted to practical matters, office locations, team integration, market positioning. Our parents offered occasional insights, but mostly they watched James and me with a mixture of surprise and satisfaction as we outlined our shared vision without the undermining jabs or competitive one-upmanship that had characterized our interactions for years. Later, as we prepared to leave, Dad pulled me aside in the hallway while Mom was saying goodbye to James and Sophie in the kitchen. "This merger," he said quietly. "It wasn't entirely mutual from the beginning, was it?" His perceptiveness didn't surprise me. Dad had always read between lines with unsettling accuracy. "No," I admitted. "It's been a complex negotiation, professionally and personally." He nodded thoughtfully. "James has always hidden insecurity behind bravado, and you've always hidden ambition behind practicality. Perhaps this arrangement will allow you both to be more authentic." His insight struck unexpectedly close to home. "When did you become so psychologically astute?" Dad smiled slightly. "I've had decades to study my children, even when they thought I wasn't paying attention." He squeezed my shoulder affectionately. "I'm proud of you, Emma. Not just for your business success, but for finding a way to transform rivalry into partnership. That's true emotional intelligence." His words stayed with me as I drove home that night, the city lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets. The brother who had said I'd never amount to anything was now publicly acknowledging my value as a business leader and partner. The family that had often seemed to favor his approach now recognized the validity of mine. But more importantly, James and I had found a way forward that honored both our individual strengths and our shared history. His company didn't just report to me now. We were building something together that transcended the competitive dynamic that had defined us for so long. The official merger announcement was scheduled for Thursday morning. We had agreed to hold a joint all-hands meeting with both companies, followed by a press conference and client briefings. As the date approached, teams from both organizations worked feverishly to finalize integration plans and communication strategies. Wednesday evening, the night before the announcement, I was working late in my office when a knock on the door startled me. James stood in the doorway, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Pre-celebration?" he suggested, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. "Or possibly liquid courage for tomorrow's circus." I raised an eyebrow at the unexpected visit, but cleared space on my desk as he set down the glasses. "Confident the announcement will go smoothly?" "Not remotely," he replied with surprising candor, opening the champagne with practiced ease. "But I've learned recently that some things are worth doing even when the outcome is uncertain." He poured 2 glasses, handing one to me before settling into the chair opposite my desk. For a moment, we sat in silence, the enormity of tomorrow's public commitment hanging between us. "To unexpected partnerships," James finally offered, raising his glass. "And rebuilt bridges," I added, recalling his words from earlier in the week. We clinked glasses, the simple ritual somehow significant in its normalcy. 2 siblings sharing a quiet moment without the weight of competition or resentment. "You know," James said after taking a sip, "for years, I've defined success as proving I was right and everyone else was wrong, especially you." The admission was startlingly frank. "And now?" He studied his glass thoughtfully. "Now I'm wondering if success might look more like building something that outlasts my ego. Something I couldn't create alone." "That's unexpectedly philosophical coming from you," I observed. James smiled wryly. "Near bankruptcy has a way of clarifying priorities." We lapsed into comfortable silence again, the city lights twinkling beyond my office window as evening deepened into night. Tomorrow would bring the public beginning of our professional partnership, the moment when James's company officially became part of mine, when the world would see us as allies instead of competitors. But sitting here now, sharing champagne, an unguarded conversation, I realized the true transformation had already occurred. The brother who had said I'd never amount to anything had finally seen me clearly, not as a competitor to be defeated, but as a partner with complementary strengths. And perhaps, in seeing him more clearly as well, I had found something equally valuable: the ability to transform an old wound into a new beginning. "Ready for tomorrow?" James asked, breaking the silence. I met his gaze steadily. "Ready." The champagne caught the light as we raised our glasses once more. Not in toast this time, but in silent acknowledgement of the journey behind us and the key path ahead. Two siblings who had finally found a way to amount to something remarkable together. 3 months after the merger announcement, I stood at the podium in the newly renovated main conference room of our expanded headquarters. The room was packed with employees from both former companies, now unified under the Martinez and Wilson banner. Light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating faces that had grown from suspicious strangers to collaborative colleagues over the past quarter. "Today marks the official launch of the quantum integration platform," I announced, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "In just 90 days, our combined teams have accomplished what many industry experts claimed would take a year. This isn't just a technical achievement. It's proof of what becomes possible when we combine visionary innovation with disciplined execution." From my vantage point, I could see the entire leadership team seated in the front row. Paul and Lisa sat beside Michael and Alexis, their body language relaxed and collegial. And at the center, James, my brother, my former rival, my current partner, watched with an expression I was still getting used to: genuine respect. "I'd like to invite James Wilson, Director of Technical Innovation, to share more about the platform's capabilities," I said, stepping back from the microphone. James approached the podium with his characteristic confidence, but something had changed in his demeanor. The aggressive edge that had defined him for so long had softened into something more assured, more authentic. "Thank you, Emma," he began, scanning the room. "When we started this journey, many of you had concerns. Would Quantum's technology survive the merger? Would Martinez and Wilson's business approach stifle innovation? Would the Wilson siblings kill each other before the first quarter ended?" Laughter rippled through the audience, the tension of those early days now a shared joke. "But something remarkable happened instead," James continued. "We discovered that different perspectives, when aligned toward a common goal, create solutions neither approach could achieve alone. The quantum integration platform isn't just a merger of two technologies. It's a testament to the power of complementary strengths." As James launched into the technical details of the platform, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary transformation of the past 3 months. What had begun as a reluctant business necessity had evolved into something neither of us had anticipated: a genuine partnership built on mutual respect. The integration hadn't been without challenges. James and I had clashed repeatedly during the first month over development priorities, resource allocation, communication styles. Our disagreements sometimes spilled over into our standing Sunday family dinners, much to our parents' dismay. But something fundamental had shifted in our dynamic. Instead of treating disagreements as winner-take-all battles, we had learned to view them as opportunities to pressure-test ideas and find better solutions. The combative siblings who had spent decades trying to prove each other wrong had gradually become collaborative partners invested in proving each other right. After the presentation concluded and the team dispersed to a celebration lunch, I returned to my office to prepare for an afternoon meeting with Horizon executives. A knock at my door interrupted my review of the quarterly projections. "Got a minute?" James asked, leaning against the doorframe. "For the technical genius behind today's launch?" "I suppose," I teased, gesturing him in. He settled into the chair across from my desk, loosening his tie. "That went well." "Better than well," I corrected. "Marcus was practically glowing when you demonstrated the security protocol. We'll have the contract extension signed by the end of the week." James nodded, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. Not bad for a couple of siblings who couldn't share a video game console without World War III breaking out. I laughed, recalling the epic battles over their childhood Nintendo. Mom would be so proud of our personal growth. Speaking of Mom, James said, his expression turning more serious. She called this morning. Dad's retirement party next month. She wants us to give a joint speech. I raised an eyebrow. The two of us speaking together about Dad? That sounds potentially hazardous. That's what I said, but she insisted it would be meaningful for him to see how far we've come. James shrugged. I think she's still not entirely convinced this partnership isn't an elaborate practical joke. Can you blame her? We spent 20 years trying to outdo each other. James was quiet for a moment, his fingers absently straightening a stack of papers on my desk. Do? You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't pitched to Horizon that day? If you hadn't been in that boardroom? The question had crossed my mind many times over the past months. Quantum would have failed. Martinez and Wilson would have continued growing incrementally. We'd still be competitors instead of collaborators. And we'd still be the same people, James added quietly. Stuck in old patterns, old perceptions. I nodded, understanding the deeper implication of his words. Our professional integration had catalyzed a more profound personal transformation, not just in how we worked together, but in how we saw ourselves and each other. I need to tell you something, James said, his tone shifting to something more vulnerable than I was accustomed to hearing from him. Something I should have said months ago. Okay, I replied cautiously. He met my gaze directly. You were right, all those years ago when you warned me about Quantum's technical architecture, about scaling too fast, about putting product vision ahead of sustainable execution. I was too proud to listen then, and it nearly cost everyone everything. The admission hung in the air between us, more significant than any legal document we had signed to formalize our business partnership. And you were right too, I acknowledged. About the need for bold vision, for disruption, for challenging established paradigms. Martinez and Wilson was successful, but safe before the merger. Your approach pushed us beyond our comfort zone in ways we needed. James smiled, not the cocky smirk I had grown up with, but something more genuine. Look at us, admitting the other was right. The apocalypse must be imminent. I laughed, but the moment felt important, a mile marker in our evolving relationship. The brother who said I'd never amount to anything now acknowledges I was right. Should I have this engraved on something? You'll never let me live that down, will you? James asked, but there was no defensiveness in his tone. Probably not, I admitted, but I might stop using it as my primary motivation for every professional achievement. That's fair. He stood checking his watch. I should head down to the launch lunch. Coming? In a few minutes, I need to review the Horizon numbers one more time. James nodded, moving toward the door before pausing. You know, when people ask me about the merger these days, I don't talk about market conditions or strategic synergies. What do you tell them? I tell them I finally figured out that having my little sister as a rival was holding us both back. But having her as a partner, that's been the best business decision I've ever made. With that, he was gone, leaving me momentarily speechless, a rare accomplishment in our sibling dynamic. I turned to my window, looking out at the Boston skyline where both our companies had taken root and grown, now intertwined in ways I couldn't have imagined 6 months ago. The brother who had said I'd never amount to anything now called me his partner, acknowledged my strengths, and publicly credited our collaboration for Quantum's salvation and Martinez and Wilson's transformation. But the most meaningful change wasn't in our business relationship or professional achievements. It was in the dissolution of the barriers we had constructed between us over decades of competition. The assumptions, the resentments, the reflexive opposition. In their place, we were building something more enduring, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation for our differences. That evening, After the celebration had wound down and most employees had departed, I found myself back in the conference room where the day had begun. The space was quiet now, scattered glasses and plates the only evidence of the afternoon's festivities. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Roof deck in 5? Sophie's meeting us with champagne to celebrate properly." I smiled, gathering my things. 3 months ago, such an invitation would have been unthinkable. The idea of voluntarily spending evening time with James outside of business obligations entirely foreign. The roof deck of our building offered panoramic views of Boston Harbor, particularly spectacular at sunset. When I arrived, James and Sophie were already there, an ice bucket with champagne between them as they leaned against the railing. "There she is," Sophie called warmly, "the other half of Boston's most surprising business partnership." "I'm still getting used to that description," I admitted, joining them at the railing. "Join the club," James replied, opening the champagne, with practiced ease. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I'd be celebrating business success with my little sister as my partner, I'd have questioned their sanity. "And yet, here we are," Sophie observed, accepting a glass from her husband. James handed me a glass, then raised his own. "To unexpected journeys and surprising destinations. And to letting go of old stories to write better ones," I added. We clinked glasses as the setting sun cast golden light across the harbor, transforming the familiar skyline into something more luminous, more promising. "So what's next for the Wilson siblings?" Sophie asked after a moment. "Now that you've revolutionized enterprise integration technology and resolved 30 years of competitive tension in 1 quarter?" James and I exchanged glances, a silent communication that had once been impossible between us. "We've been discussing expansion," I revealed, "taking the merged technologies international, starting with Europe and Asia." "It's ambitious," James acknowledged, "but we've discovered we're at our best when tackling challenges that seem impossible." "The board's on board?" Sophie asked. I nodded. Unanimously. Our results this quarter made believers out of even the most skeptical investors. As we discussed the expansion plans, I felt a deep sense of contentment settle over me. The journey from accidental eavesdropper in that Horizon boardroom to confident co-leader of our expanded enterprise had been extraordinary. But the personal transformation had been even more profound. The brother who said I'd never amount to anything now championed my ideas, respected my approach, and valued our partnership. His company didn't just report to me. It had become interwoven, with mine to create something stronger, more innovative, and more sustainable than either could have built alone. But most importantly, James and I had discovered that our greatest strength wasn't in proving each other wrong. It was in helping each other become right. The competitive drive that had once pushed us apart now fueled a collaborative engine, driving us both forward. As darkness fell and the city lights began to twinkle below us, I realized that success wasn't about winning some imagined competition or finally proving my worth to someone who had doubted me. True success was about transformation, about growing beyond old limitations and narratives into someone capable of building bridges where walls once stood. The brother who said I'd never amount to anything now stood beside me as a partner and ally. But the most meaningful victory wasn't in changing his perception. It was in changing my own. I had finally stopped measuring my worth against his yardstick and recognized the unique value of my own approach. Sometimes the greatest journeys take us right back to where we started, but with entirely new eyes to see what was there all along. The possibility of connection, collaboration, and shared success with the very people we once thought stood in our way. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these. Just click and check them out.